Let's just be buddies. He said it calmly, sitting across from me, like he was proposing something reasonable. 2 years together. 1 year living under the same roof. Talking about the future, about weddings we would attend together, about next summer and where we might go. And on a random Wednesday night, my boyfriend looked at me and decided this was the moment to end it. Let's just be buddies. I remember the tightness in my chest before I even responded. I remember forcing myself to breathe, to stay composed, to not give him the emotional reaction he seemed prepared for. Sounds good, I said. He blinked, surprised, then relieved. What he didn't understand was that I took his words seriously, because when I treat someone like a friend, I don't blur boundaries. I don't offer boyfriend privileges. I don't linger in emotional limbo. I don't stay available while someone figures themselves out. I treat them like a friend. Exactly. And that was the beginning of the end for him. 3 weeks later, he learned what just buddies really meant when I started dating his best friend. I'm 27. 3 weeks ago, my boyfriend of 2 years sat me down and told me he wasn't in love anymore. He said he cared about me, but needed to find himself. He said we worked better as friends. He wanted to break up without actually losing me. He wanted me close, familiar, safe. He had already packed a bag. His friend was coming to pick him up. He had an exit plan, but also a backup. Me. What he didn't expect was that I wouldn't beg, wouldn't cry, wouldn't ask him to reconsider, wouldn't wait around while he explored other options. He thought friendship meant keeping everything the same, minus commitment. I heard something very different. I heard boundaries. So I gave him exactly what he asked for. Nothing more, nothing less. And the moment I did, everything he thought he controlled started to fall apart, because being broken up with hurts. But being treated like you truly asked for? That's when reality hits the hardest. Before that night, I genuinely believed we were solid. I was 27, working a steady job, the kind that didn't make for exciting stories, but paid the bills and gave me structure. I liked routines. I liked knowing where I stood. He used to tease me for that, calling me too serious, but I thought it balanced us. I thought we grounded each other. We had been together for 2 years, living together for 1. We met through mutual friends, started as something casual that quickly became familiar and comfortable. He was charming, social, the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately feel at home. I was more reserved, but with him, I felt safe enough to open up. We built a life that looked stable from the outside. Shared groceries, shared rent, shared inside jokes, lazy Sundays on the couch, talking about future plans like they were a given. We discussed his cousin's wedding next summer, how I'd be his date, what we'd wear, who we'd sit next to. We talked about moving to a bigger place eventually, about traveling more once things settled. That's the thing about breakups like this. They don't come after chaos. They come after comfort. There were signs looking back. Little ones I brushed off because nothing felt urgent enough to confront. He started spending more time out with friends, longer nights, more vague explanations. When I asked how his day was, his answers became shorter. When I talked about mine, he listened, but not the way he used to. Still, nothing felt wrong enough to panic. I trusted him. He talked often about finding himself, about not wanting to wake up at 30 feeling like he'd settled too early. I told myself that was normal, that everyone has phases of doubt, that love meant giving space when it was needed. What I didn't realize was that he'd already started planning his exit. When he sat me down that Wednesday night, he didn't look nervous. He looked prepared, calm, like he'd rehearsed the conversation in his head long before I ever knew it was coming. He told me he cared about me deeply, that I was important to him, that we worked so well as people. Then came the line that changed everything. He wasn't in love anymore. He said we vibed too well to lose each other, that we shared the same friend group, liked the same things, understood each other in ways most couples didn't. He said we'd make great friends, just not great partners. I remember staring at him, trying to reconcile his words with the life we were living only days before. What hurt most wasn't the breakup itself. It was how neatly he had already organized his escape. He'd packed a bag. His friend Chris was picking him up in an hour. He had a place to stay, a plan to sort out the apartment, and a vision where we stayed close, stayed kind, stayed convenient. For him. He wanted to leave without losing access to me, and I didn't understand that yet. That night ended quietly, but nothing about it felt calm. After he left with his bag, the apartment felt too large, like the walls were listening. I sat on the edge of the couch, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of how 2 years could be reduced to a request for friendship. He had said all the right words. He had been gentle, reasonable, almost proud of how mature he was being. And yet something felt off. The next morning, I decided to do exactly what he asked. I treated him like a friend. At 6:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from him. "Hey, hope you're okay. Can you drop off my work tablet? I forgot it in the rush." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. When we were together, I would have grabbed it and driven across town without a second thought. Instead, I typed back calmly, "Sure, I'll leave it at your office reception on Monday." There was a pause, then another message. "Can't you bring it to Chris's place? I need it this weekend." "I've got plans," I replied. "Monday's better." "What plans?" I hesitated, then smiled to myself. "Friend stuff." He didn't like that. I could tell. But what could he say? He was the one who asked for this. Saturday came, another text. "Chris and I are hitting that new cafe. Want to join?" "Thanks, but I'm good," I replied. "Enjoy." "Come on, we always do Saturday coffee." "That was when we were together," I said. "Have a great time." 2 hours later, another message. "This is weird. Why are you acting so distant?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Distant? I'm being friendly, like you wanted." That was when I realized something important. His idea of friendship and mine were not the same thing at all. A week in, the entitlement started to surface. He still had his key. While I was at work one Tuesday, he let himself into the apartment, helped himself to snacks, did laundry, took a shower, left a note on the counter saying he'd grabbed a few things and hoped it was okay. It wasn't. I texted him, "Hey, saw you stop by. I'll need the key back when you can." "What? Why?" he replied. "I still have stuff there." "My friends don't have keys to my place," I wrote. "We can schedule times for you to pick things up." He showed up that evening, angry, accusing me of being petty, of overreacting. I stayed calm. "We used to live together," I said. "Now we're friends. Different rules, different boundaries." He looked genuinely shocked, like this version of reality had never crossed his mind. The tension kept building. He expected access, familiarity, emotional availability. I gave him politeness, distance, consistency, and the more I held my ground, the more unsettled he became. Because what he really wanted wasn't friendship. He wanted the comfort of me without the commitment. And slowly, without realizing it, he was planting the seeds of his own unraveling. The real rupture didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It built up quietly, then snapped when I stopped playing along. It was the following Tuesday when he came back to the apartment while I was still at work. I knew because my phone buzzed, with a notification from the door camera. He walked in like nothing had changed, like the conversation from the week before had been a misunderstanding instead of a breakup. When I got home that evening, the sink was wet, the couch cushions were shifted, and a note sat on the counter in his handwriting. "Grabbed some things. Hope that's okay." I stood there for a long time, keys still in my hand, feeling a strange mix of anger and clarity. This wasn't confusion. This was entitlement. I texted him, "Hey, saw you stopped by. I'll need the key back." The reply came fast. "Why? I still live there." "No," I typed carefully. "You used to live here. Now we're friends." He showed up an hour later, furious. He accused me of being petty, of changing the rules without warning. I stayed calm, my voice steady, even though my chest was tight. "I didn't change the rules," I said. "You did. I'm just following them." That's when he realized I wasn't bluffing. A few days later came our friend group's board game night. I arrived alone. He arrived with someone new, a guy from his gym. Loud introductions, forced laughter. The whole thing felt staged, like he was waiting for a reaction. I shook the guy's hand, welcomed him, then focused on the game. I laughed with friends. I played hard. I didn't look at him more than necessary. Halfway through the night, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You don't even care that I brought someone else?" I met his eyes. "Why would I?" "Because we just broke up." "And we're friends now," I said. "Friends date." He frowned. "You're not even jealous?" "Are you jealous when your other friends date?" "That's different." "How?" He had no answer. What he couldn't admit was that he expected me to wait, to stay emotionally available while he tested the waters. He wanted freedom without consequences. That was the moment something shifted for good. Because later that night, his best friend Chris kept finding reasons to talk to me. Joking. Laughing. Asking questions he'd never asked before. I wasn't trying to spark anything. I was just being myself, without shrinking, without managing anyone's emotions. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. "What was that with you and Chris last night?" he texted. I stared at the message, then replied simply, We were talking. Friends talk. The silence that followed lasted 3 days. And when it finally broke, I knew the situation had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The silence after those 3 days felt heavier than any argument we'd had. When his name finally lit up my screen again, I already knew the tone before I read the message. I think I messed up about us. Can we talk? I didn't feel relief. I felt tired. Sure, I replied. What's on your mind? In person, he said. Dinner at our spot. Our spot. The bistro we went to when things felt safe and familiar. The place where he used to reach across the table and squeeze my hand. I stared at the message, then typed back calmly. I've got plans. I can do coffee Saturday if you want to catch up. There was a pause, then, plans with who? I exhaled slowly. Does it matter? Friends don't track each other's schedules. Another pause. Is it Chris? Coffee Saturday or no? I asked. This isn't how friends act. This is exactly how friends act, I replied. You're thinking of boyfriends. Easy mix-up. That was the moment the dynamic shifted completely. By the 3rd week of this so-called friendship, he was unraveling. The confidence he'd had when he asked for just buddies was gone, replaced by agitation and control he could no longer disguise. Meanwhile, I was adjusting. Sleeping better. Reclaiming pieces of my routine that had slowly disappeared while I centered his comfort over mine. He wasn't handling that well. The guy from his gym disappeared after a couple of hangouts. No drama, no explanation, just gone. I could tell it bruised his ego more than he wanted to admit. Then Chris texted me one Thursday night. Hey, random question. I've got an extra ticket to a stand-up show Saturday. Want to come? I stared at my phone, surprised. To be clear, I hadn't pursued Chris. I hadn't even considered him that way before. But he was easy to talk to, direct. No games, no emotional ambiguity. Sure, I replied. Sounds good. Cool, he said. Just a heads up, he's acting a little weird about us hanging out. I can imagine, I wrote. Still up for it? Totally. I'll pick you up at 6:30. For the first time since the breakup, I felt excited, not anxious, not conflicted, just curious. As I was getting ready Saturday evening, my phone started blowing up. What are you doing? Are you serious right now? Chris just told me you're going out with him. I paused, lipstick halfway up. He invited me to a comedy show. You can't date my best friend. Why not? I asked. We're both single. That's not how this works. I laughed softly, more in disbelief than humor. You don't get to decide that. He called. Then again. Then again. I silenced my phone. The date was easy. Chris was funny without trying too hard. Present. Interested in me, not the version of me he could keep on standby. We didn't talk about my ex until the very end. I should probably tell you, Chris said as he walked me to my door. He's not taking this well. I figured. He called me crying, Chris admitted. Said I betrayed him. I met his eyes. How do you feel about it? Chris hesitated. Honestly, he hasn't been a great friend lately. Everything's been about his journey. Last week, he literally said keeping you as a friend was his safety net in case he didn't find someone better. That landed harder than I expected. We shared a simple goodnight kiss. Sweet, gentle, nothing rushed. And somehow, that was enough to completely shatter the illusion he'd been trying to maintain. Things escalated fast after that night. I didn't post anything. I didn't tell anyone. Chris and I agreed to keep things low-key, not because we were hiding, but because neither of us wanted unnecessary drama. We were just seeing where things went, calmly, like adults. He didn't give us that chance. Early Sunday morning, around 5:30 a.m., someone started pounding on my door. Hard, desperate, angry. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Open up, he shouted. I know you're there. I opened the door just enough to face him. His hair was messy, his eyes were red and swollen. He was wearing the same clothes from Friday night. It's 5:30, I said evenly. What do you want? You kissed him, he snapped. My best friend. I crossed my arms, keeping my body between him and the doorway. Yes. You did that to hurt me. I'm living my life, I said. You ended our relationship. I said friends, he shot back. Not that you could date my friends. You said you needed to find yourself, I replied. I'm letting you do that while I move on. He tried to push past me. I blocked him instinctively. You don't live here anymore, I said. I still have stuff here. Then schedule a pickup like we agreed. You're being heartless. No, I corrected him. I'm setting boundaries. That was when his entitlement fully surfaced. He stormed off, and within hours, my phone started lighting up. Mutual friends, messages, confusion. Apparently, he'd started telling people I was revenge dating Chris just to punish him. Some believed him, most didn't. One of our friends, Max, called me directly. He says you're only with Chris to get back at him. I let out a slow breath. Did he mention he dumped me to find himself but wanted me to stay as his emotional support? There was a pause. No, he skipped that part. Figures. Then he crossed a line that stunned me. On Monday morning, my manager pulled me aside at work. Concerned. Serious. Your boyfriend called, she said. He listed himself as your emergency contact. He said you're having a mental breakdown and might need time off. My stomach dropped. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected her. I'm fine. He's not handling the breakup well. She nodded slowly. We figured something felt off. HR documented the call. I did too. Screenshots, dates, a paper trail. That wasn't the end of it. A week later, he texted me at 1 a.m. We need to talk. I'm late. Late for what? I asked. You know, pregnant. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Congratulations, I replied. Who's the father? There was a pause. You, obviously. I felt something cold settle in my chest. We haven't slept together in 2 months, I said. If you're serious, we can do this properly. Doctor visit. Paternity test when possible. Silence. The next day, a message. False alarm. Got my period. I didn't respond. The real meltdown came when he realized I was serious about separating our life completely. I canceled the shared streaming accounts, removed him from my phone plan, took my name off anything we'd once bundled together. His father called me, angry. Why did you cancel his phone? He doesn't live with me anymore, I said calmly. Friends don't pay each other's bills. He made a mistake, his dad insisted. He sees that now. Then he learned a lesson, I replied. But the breaking point came when he found out Chris and I were planning a weekend trip to the same lake town he and I had once visited together. He sent me a long message accusing me of erasing our memories, disrespecting our history, stealing his life. It's a public lake, I replied. You don't own it. You know what you're doing. Yes, I said. I'm taking my boyfriend on a trip. She's not your boyfriend, he snapped. She is, I replied. You stopped being. That's when he lost control completely. He showed up at Chris's workplace and caused a scene. Security escorted him out. Chris called me afterward, shaken. He's lost it, Chris said. My boss wasn't happy. That incident led to consequences he couldn't spin away. A month after the Just Buddies talk, his perfect plan had collapsed. He was living with his parents, in therapy, out of a job after missing too much work during his meltdowns. And none of it was because I attacked him. It was because I stopped protecting him. The night everything finally caught up to me, I was alone. Not the quiet, peaceful kind of alone I'd been slowly getting used to, but the kind that presses in on your chest and makes the room feel smaller. Chris had gone home earlier. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, staring at the last message he had sent me before I blocked him everywhere. You ruined my life. I read it over and over, even though I knew better. Even though I knew how much he had twisted the narrative to make himself the victim. Even though I knew the truth. Still, it sank in. For weeks, I had been steady, calm, controlled. I'd done everything right. Set boundaries, spoke clearly, refused to engage in chaos, and yet somehow I was still being painted as the villain, the cold one, the heartless one, the one who moved on too fast. That night, the doubt crept in. I replayed every moment from the last 2 years, every compromise, every time I'd softened my needs to keep things smooth, every time I'd chosen understanding over honesty. I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding since the breakup. Was I too harsh? I imagined him alone at his parents' house, angry, embarrassed, stripped of the identity he thought he'd curated so carefully. I imagined our friends choosing sides, whispering versions of the story that left out the parts where he wanted me as a safety net. I imagined the look on his face when Chris stopped answering his calls. And for the first time since this all began, I felt the weight of it crash down on me. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I pressed my palms together, trying to steady my breathing. I hated that I still cared. Hated that some part of me still wanted him to understand instead of collapse. That was the lowest point. Not the breakup, not the shouting, not the accusations. The moment I realized that even after everything, I was still trying to carry his emotions for him. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, tears finally spilling over. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet, exhausted crying. The kind that comes when you're done fighting yourself. I whispered out loud to no one in particular, I didn't do this to him. And saying it felt like permission. Permission to stop explaining. Permission to stop justifying. Permission to stop shrinking myself so someone else wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. By the time the tears stopped, something inside me had settled. I couldn't save him from the consequences of his choices. I couldn't make him see me as anything other than the version he'd invented. All I could do was let go. And that realization, painful as it was, became the quiet beginning of something new. The shift didn't come with fireworks or some dramatic realization. It came quietly. The morning after that night, I cried myself to sleep. I woke up early, the apartment still dim, sunlight barely slipping through the curtains. For a moment, I lay there listening to my own breathing, noticing how steady it was. No messages, no missed calls, no new chaos waiting on my phone, just silence. And for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel threatening. I made coffee and sat at the table, staring at the mug in my hands, replaying one sentence Chris had said to me on our date. He said keeping you as a friend was his safety net. That sentence reframed everything. It wasn't that he missed me. It wasn't that he wanted friendship. It was that he wanted access without responsibility. Once I saw it that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. I opened my phone and reviewed the steps I'd already taken. Boundaries set, accounts separated, work notified, documentation saved. I realized something important in that moment. I hadn't acted emotionally. I had acted deliberately. Every decision had been measured, calm, necessary. That wasn't cruelty. That was self-respect. Later that afternoon, I met Chris for a walk. No big talk, no pressure, just movement, fresh air, normal conversation. At one point, he stopped and looked at me carefully. "Are you okay?" he asked. I thought about it honestly before answering. "I am," I said. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending managing someone else's feelings until I stopped. He nodded, like that made complete sense. That was when I knew this wasn't just about dating again. It was about choosing differently. Choosing someone who didn't confuse control with connection. Someone who didn't need me small so he could feel secure. That evening, I did one last thing. I blocked my ex email address. Not out of anger, out of closure. There was nothing left to explain. No argument left to win. No misunderstanding left to clarify. He understood enough. He just didn't like the outcome. And that wasn't my problem to fix. Standing in my kitchen, phone finally quiet, I felt something settle deep in my chest. A calm certainty. The kind that doesn't need validation. I hadn't lost anything by refusing to stay just buddies. I had reclaimed myself. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, then all together, like dominoes finally tipping after being lined up for weeks. Once I stopped responding, the stories he told people started to collapse under their own weight. Mutual friends compared notes. Timelines didn't match. The version where I was cruel and revenge dating didn't explain why he had packed a bag before the breakup, or why he insisted on staying emotionally close after ending things. The gaps became obvious. Some friends drifted away from him quietly. Others confronted him directly. I didn't participate. I didn't correct anyone. I let the truth stand on its own. Chris and I kept things simple. No grand declarations, no social media announcements. Just dinners, long walks, shared laughter. Being with someone who didn't demand access to my emotions felt unfamiliar at first, almost suspicious. Then it felt peaceful. Meanwhile, his life shrank. He lost his job after too many absences tied to his spirals. He moved back in with his parents. Therapy became mandatory after the incident at Chris's workplace. The image he had of himself as the reasonable, mature one didn't survive contact with reality. I heard about it secondhand, always secondhand. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt detached. One night, an email slipped through before I blocked the last remaining channel. A long message, accusatory, emotional. He wrote that I had turned his best friend against him, that I had made him look unstable, that I had won. I read it once, then I deleted it. Because I hadn't won anything. I had simply stopped losing. The most telling moment came when his father called me again, this time calmer, tired. "He's struggling," he said. "He didn't think it would go like this." I kept my voice steady. He asked for friendship. I gave it to him, with boundaries. There was a pause. "I think he thought you'd wait." "So did he," I replied. "That was the mistake." After that, the calls stopped. Life moved forward, quietly, intentionally. I reclaimed my routines, my time, my sense of self. The chaos faded because I refused to feed it. And what remained was clarity. A few months later, my life felt unrecognizable in the best way. Not because something extraordinary had happened, but because the constant tension was gone. No more walking on eggshells. No more managing someone else's uncertainty. No more shrinking myself so another person could feel secure while exploring their options. Chris and I were still together. Easy, honest, no drama. We laughed about how chaotic the beginning had been, but most days it barely came up. What we had wasn't built on timing games or emotional leverage. It was built on clarity. Dating someone who knows what they want is refreshing in a way I didn't realize I'd been missing. As for my ex, I stopped checking in on his life entirely. Not out of bitterness, out of disinterest. The last I heard, he was living with his parents, working part-time, focusing on therapy. Maybe he learned something. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility to care. Every now and then, I think back to that Wednesday night when he said, "Let's just be buddies," like it was a kindness, like he was sparing me something. What he really wanted was to downgrade me without losing access, to keep the emotional benefits of a relationship while freeing himself from accountability. He wanted me available, loyal, supportive, and waiting, all while he figured himself out. And when I didn't play that role, when I took him at his word and treated him exactly like a friend, everything fell apart. Not because I was cruel, because real friendship has boundaries. Friends don't have keys to your apartment. Friends don't get emotional priority. Friends don't get boyfriend privileges. Friends don't get to dictate who you date or how fast you move on. He thought I'd linger in limbo. I chose to move forward. That choice exposed what he was really asking for: a safety net, a backup, a version of me that existed for his comfort, not my own happiness. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't try to hurt him. I didn't orchestrate his downfall. I simply lived my life honestly, set boundaries, and chose someone who chose me back. And that turned out to be the harshest lesson of all. So here's what I learned. When someone says they want to just be friends after a serious relationship, listen carefully. Take them literally. Treat them like a friend. Nothing more, nothing less. If they truly want friendship, they'll respect your boundaries. If they wanted control, they'll crumble without it. Either way, you'll get clarity. And clarity is always worth choosing.